This week on Myth, you'll learn that sky gods are assholes, that spiders can't be trusted, and that invisible fairies take courtesy very, very seriously. This is the Myths Your Teacher Hated podcast, where I tell the stories of cultures from around the world in all of their original, bloody, uncensored glory. Modern tellings of these stories have become dry and dusty, but I'll be trying to breathe new life into them. This is episode 2, The Amazing Spider-Man. As always, this episode is not safe for work. This week's story centers around the character of Anansi, a trickster hero from African folklore. He originated in present-day Ghana from the Ashanti people. He often takes the appearance of a spider. His name actually means spider, but also sometimes appears as a man, and is the spirit of knowledge and stories. In the early days of the world, Anansi sat in his web, he's a spider right now, and watched the people. During the day, they were busy with their lives and industrious, which was good, but at night, they would sit around their fires and be bored, which was bad. You can only fuck so much, and without birth control, it can result in a bunch of kids you can't feed. He liked people, which didn't stop him from tricking them from time to time, so he decided to help. There weren't many entertainment options, or really any, so he decides that they need stories. Then they could tell some stories, and the rest would listen, and it would be something to do between fucking and sleeping. In other versions, Anansi decides to get the stories because he thinks he can do a better job of telling them. Nyame, the sky god, kept all the stories in a beautiful wooden chest. In other stories, he is called Nyankopon, and I'm sure that pronunciation is wrong, which means he who knows and sees everything. His right eye is the sun, which he opens during the day, and his left eye is the moon, which he opens at night. Since he wants all the stories for himself, he kept the box close to him at all times. Anansi, being a trickster, would normally use stealth and trickery to get what he wanted, but he wasn't sure it would work this time. So the next morning, Anansi spins the thread up to the clouds and goes to talk to Nyame. Since this was the sky god, and as we've already seen, sky gods can be easily offended and very, very dangerous, he'd try being on his best behavior. He put on his best shit-eating grin and went to talk to Nyame. He tried the direct approach. Nyame, great and powerful sky god, the people are bored, and I feel sorry for them. I want to share your stories with them and make their lives suck a little less. What's it going to cost me to get some of those top-quality stories? Nyame, being a dick, laughed in his face, and his voice boomed like thunder. Literally, because sky god. Get real, little Anansi. You're poor as shit. Super rich princes and even entire villages have tried to buy my stories with gold and jewels and women, and no one has been able to afford it yet. Anansi thinks, fuck you, asshole. But he's trying to be polite, so he says, seriously, Nyame, what's the price? I can pay. What do you want? Nyame laughs again, because he's really enjoying making Anansi, famous for making powerful people and gods look like idiots, to be nice to him. Alright then, little spider. If you want my stories, you have to bring me 4 things. Since Nyame had all the stories, he should have known the fucking rule of 3s, but whatever. Bring me the following. Onini, the python that can swallow an entire goat. Osibo, the leopard with teeth as sharp as spears. Maboro, the hornets whose sting is like red-hot needles. And Mwatia, the bitchy fairy that no one can see. Not sure why we suddenly broke the pattern of nasty but real animals for a fucking magical fairy, but again, Nyame didn't seem to give a shit about story rules, even though he has all of them. In later versions, they remove Mwatia because she doesn't really fit, but her story has inspired others, so I've kept it in. Fuck me, thinks Anansi. This fuckstick is trying to get me killed. Out loud he says, oh, okay, Nyame. I can totally do that. He tries not to let the asshole see him rattled. This was gonna suck. Because, and I cannot stress this enough, sky gods are dicks. Nyame laughs at Anansi's mortal peril, and waves him out of the room, clouds, whatever it was. He thinks the idea of Anansi actually trying to take on these very dangerous creatures is hilarious. Anansi asks around, and finds out that he is not the first to try and pay the price. No surprise there. And that everyone who has tried never returned. Also not really a surprise. Unlike the Olympians, Anansi is not immortal, so he's totally worried about dying at the hand, or paws, or claws, or fangs of these 4 awful-sounding monsters. He goes back to his wife Aso, and tells her about the people, the stories, and the price, and she agrees that he needs to help. She doesn't show up in all versions, but I like that we have a myth where a female character isn't super sexist, so I've used that version. Together, they work out a plan to take down Onini, the python that can eat a goat. Probably because he was the least terrifying. Lots of pythons can eat a goat, but that's still more than enough to eat an annoying spider, even a very big, magical one. The next day, Anansi goes into the forest with a long stick, muttering to himself about how he knows his wife is wrong. God damn it, she's definitely fucking wrong, and I am definitely right. He keeps up a constant stream of muttering as he approaches the main watering hole in the forest. Above him, from out of the underbrush, the large, sleek head of Onini the python appears. What the fuck, dude? I was trying to sleep. What the fuck are you going on about? And it better be good, Anansi, or I'm going to swallow you whole for waking me the fuck up. Showtime. Oh, great and mighty Onini, my wife is an idiot. We got into a fight. About you, actually. I was saying that you were large and mighty, the biggest snake in the land. My wife, on the other hand, insists that you were shorter than this stick. It's crazy, I know. I kept telling her that you were much, much longer. But I can't figure out how to prove her wrong. Onini shook his head. Anansi, you dumbass. It's really easy. I can't believe you can't figure this out. You're supposed to be clever. He slithered onto the ground. Lay your stick on the ground, and I'll stretch out beside it. Then you can see which is longer. Of course, being a python, Onini had trouble keeping stretched out straight. He kept coiling his body up, making it difficult to measure his full length. Anansi looked at the situation for a minute, then had an idea. Tell you what, great Onini. I'll use my silk to keep you fastened to the stick so that I can measure your full length and prove my foolish wife wrong. I'll be able to wave your great size and strength in her face. It's gonna be awesome. Onini, who loved having whatever passed for his ass kissed, agreed. Once he was bound tightly to the stick, Anansi started laughing and dancing around. Who's the dumbass now, Onini? You're tied to the stick, and I'm gonna take you to Niame. I have no idea why he wants you, but fuck it, sucks to be you. He attached a thread of silk to the helpless snake and hauled him up to the clouds. He sauntered into the sky god's cloud room and presented his conquest. Niame smirked. That's just one. You've still got 3 more chances to fucking fail. What an asshole. Anansi swung back down to earth and talked to his wife about the next task. They talked it over and came up with a plan to ensnare Osibo, the leopard with teeth as sharp as spears. The next day, he went out looking for a path that the leopard supposedly took every night to the watering hole. Everyone needs water, and the watering hole was the place to get it, so it's not that weird that this keeps coming up. He followed the path a ways and found a good place to hide a trap. He dug a deep hole, big enough for the leopard to fall in, and too deep for him to crawl out of. It took all day, and by the end Anansi was dirty and tired, but he was determined and busted his ass to get it done. He finished the hole, then laid thin sticks across it. He covered the sticks with leaves and dirt to make it look exactly like the ground. He was hungry as hell and about ready to pass out by the time the sky started to darken, but eventually he was satisfied that the hole was invisible. He went home to a delicious home-cooked meal, and no, I don't know what giant anthropomorphic spiders eat. They went to bed, and Anansi was too tired to even try to fuck his wife. He passed out as soon as he laid down and slept like a log. The next morning, he woke up, stretched out some of the soreness, maybe had some morning sex, and went for a walk in the forest. It wasn't long before he started hearing angry screeching and scrabbling from the hole he'd dug. He hurried over to the pit and saw that the sticks had broken and tumbled in on top of a very angry leopard. Osibo was trying to claw his way out of the pit, but it was deep enough and the dirt was soft enough that he couldn't get more than halfway up without tumbling back down again. By the crooked whiskers and dirty claws, he'd been at it for a while. Anansi stuck his head over the hole and said, "Good morning, Osibo. Why are you hanging out in a hole? That seems like a weird choice." "Don't be an asshat, Anansi. You know damn well that I got caught in some douche's trap. Are you gonna help me out or what?" "Oh, Osibo. No, definitely not. Your strength and ferocity is well known. If I help you out, after you've been working up an appetite all night trying to get out, you will certainly eat me, my wife, and my children, and there's fuck all I can do to stop you." He pulled his head back and started to walk away. Anansi, come back. Look, how about I promise not to, huh? Then will you stop being a pussy and help me out?" Anansi stuck his head back into the hole. "Well, since you ask so nicely, and since I have your promise, I'll help. Hold on." He went to a nearby willow tree that he had spotted the day before. He pulled the top down to reach over the hole and tied it to a stake with his silk. Then, he spun another long, sticky strand down into the pit. "Wind the silk around your tail, Osibo. Tired after a long night of not escaping, Osibo did exactly as instructed. He was ready to make like a tree and get the fuck out of here. After he was done, Anansi cut the thread holding the tree in place. It whipped back into the air, taking a surprised, yowling leopard with it. He spun round and round the tree, getting more and more tangled up in the spider silk. By the time the tree stopped moving, Osibo was completely wrapped up in the sticky thread. Anansi went and neatly snipped the thread from the tree, dropping Osibo onto his face. Motherfucker, that hurt. Alright, Anansi, let me out and try not to take off too much fur. Anansi shook his head, chuckling. Sorry, Osibo, but the Sky God wants you, and I don't really have much choice. So saying, he took the leopard up into the sky too. Niame smirked. That's just 2. You've still got 2 more chances to fucking fail. Seriously, what an asshole. Anansi was starting to feel a little better about his chances. He swung back down to his home and again consulted with his wife. Together, they came up with a plan to trap Maboro, the hornets whose sting is like red-hot needles. They hollowed out a large calabash, a gourd that kind of looks like very large anal beads, and filled it with water. He went out and cut down a leaf from a plantain tree, then carried both items off to a tree where he knew there was a hornet's nest. Anansi poured half of the water out of his anal bead gourd over his head so that he was dripping wet, then threw the rest of the water over the nest until it was soggy and disgusting. Hornets' nests don't hold up well to water, because apparently the gods figured the little bastards weren't mean enough already. Then, Anansi held the leaf over his head and pretended to use it as an umbrella. The Maboro flew out, and hell hath no fury like a swarm of pissed-off hornets. They had spotted Anansi and were about to take out their collective dickery on him, since he was the first thing they saw capable of feeling pain. But Anansi called out, "Oh, dude, that fucking monsoon came early. That fucker Niame can't keep on a schedule to save his life. If your wings get wet, you won't be able to fly, and will definitely get eaten by something. Tell you what, I happen to have this calabash here that I was going to put some water in. Why don't you all take shelter in here until the rain passes?" The hornets were grateful. "Thank you, Anansi. We should have known we could trust another insect." And they flew in. As soon as they were inside, Anansi wrapped the hole in his silk so there was no opening left. "Idiots. Don't you know that a spider isn't an insect? Now I'm going to take you to Niame. I'm starting to see why he set such a ridiculous price. I could be dead 3 times over by now." And so saying, he swung up into the clouds. Anansi presented the angry, buzzing hornets to Niame, who again smirked. "That's just 3. You've still got 1 more chance to fucking fail." What a royal asshole. He swung back down to his wife, and again, the 2 of them talked long into the night, devising a plan to capture Moatia, the bitchy fairy that no one can see. He carved a doll from the wood of a gum tree, then plastered it with the sticky gum. If you're familiar with the story of Anansi's spiritual cousin Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby, you already know where this is going. His wife, Aso, pounded yams into a paste with eggs and oil to make a dish known as ano, which fairies apparently love. They knew where the fairies like to play and dance, because even though you can't see them, you can totally fucking hear them. You know those creepy, disembodied giggling children in every horror movie about possession ever? They sounded a lot like that. He went out in the middle of the day, when the brutal sun convinced everyone not on a crazy quest from the Sky God to find shade and rest, rather than die of fucking heat exhaustion. He crept sneakily up to a lovely clearing, and sat the doll on the grass with a dish of yams beside it, smelling heavenly. He wove a very fine thread from the doll's head back to his hiding place in the bushes. Then he waited. Nothing happened all day, but as the sun set behind the trees, and the sky faded from orange to red and on to purple, he heard a voice say, "Hello, little gum baby. That ano smells delicious. Can I have some?" Anansi twitched the thread, and the doll nodded. Awesome sauce. The dish floated into the air, and he watched in disgust as she proceeded to devour the ano in a tornado of half-chewed food. Think Taz the Tasmanian Devil, and you'll be pretty close. Once the food stopped flying, and she stopped licking the bowl clean, she dropped it on the grass. "Thank you." Anansi said nothing. There was a pause. She said it again, louder. "I said, thank you." Anansi said nothing. Now she was pissed. "I said thank you, you miserable little sack of shit. If someone is being polite to you, have some goddamn manners and say you're welcome. I could have just taken the yams while you were blinded by your own fat face. But no, I asked because I'm not a bitch. Either you say thank you nicely, or I'll beat it out of you." When confronted with more silence, Moatia screamed wordlessly and punched the doll in the stomach. Her hands stuck to the gum. "What the fuck? Let my hand go, or I'll knock your fucking teeth out." After a beat, She did just that, and her hand again stuck to the gum. She screamed wordlessly and put both feet into a massive kick, and got them both stuck. She began to roll around on the ground with the gum doll, getting hopelessly entangled. Anansi leapt out of hiding, wound her and the doll up in thread, and picked her up. That was fucking stupid, Moatia. But it works for me, and now you're coming with me to Niame. When he presented this last figure to the sky god, he looked surprised to see him. Well, what do you know? You actually pulled it off. Alright, fair is fair. He took the sticky ball of fairy and placed it with the others. Princes and rich villages tried and failed, and quite a few died wonderfully bloody deaths. But you are apparently not a complete fucking moron. He raised his voice. Listen up, everyone. Kwaku Anansi has paid the price for the sky god's stories. They belong to him now, and will be known as spider stories. He handed the beautifully carved box to Anansi, who upended it and spread it over the entire earth. And that's why people have stories to tell. Though not even Anansi knows what the sky god did with the poor sacrifices. With stories made safe for the world, it's time for Gods and Monsters. This is a segment where I get into a little more detail about the personalities and history of one of the gods or monsters from this week's pantheon that was not discussed in the main story. This week's monster is the Popobawa. This monster is particularly fucked up for two reasons. 1. Attacks by this monster have been reported as recently as 2007, so it's still active. And 2. It's far more likely to attack you if you don't believe in it. The Popobawa originated on the Tanzanian island of Pemba, but has spread to Tanzania and to other East African nations. It is an evil spirit, and its name is a combination of the Swahili words for bat, popo, and wing, bawa. In some stories, the creature does in fact have bat wings, but in many, the name refers to the shape its shadow casts on your wall at night when it attacks. The creature is a shapeshifter, which can take any human or animal form. In its human form, it's described as having a stunted but powerful body, pointed ears, inch-long talons, and a single cyclopean eye. It sometimes attacks in the day, but much more commonly appears in your bedroom at night, often accompanied by the stench of sulfur. It can attack men, women, and children, but its favorite targets are skeptical men. Often, it attacks every member of a household in turn, before moving on to another household in the neighborhood. Its attacks can range from the harmless to the truly terrifying. If you're lucky, it will just cause poltergeist-type shenanigans, such as moving your shit, riding on mirrors, or knocking things over. If you're less lucky, it will physically assault you, or wake you up by sitting on your chest so you can't breathe. And if you're really unlucky, or don't believe in it, it will rape you in the ass. And yes, you heard that right. Apparently, the Popobawa is deeply offended that more people don't believe in it, which is why it attacks skeptics. It has been known to urge victims to spread the word about the assault, and to threaten to return for another round of surprise sex if they do not. During panics, people have been known to sit outside their door all night to guard against a visit. The Popobawa is of fairly recent origin. The first sightings occurred on the island of Pemba in 1965, but it didn't really gain traction until 1970, though it has been making appearances every 5 to 10 years, up until as recently as 2007, so we're about due for another round of assaults. The most recent story on the creature's origin says that during the 1970s, an angry sheik released a jinn, which is a Middle Eastern demon that gave rise to the story of the genie, to take vengeance on his neighbors. The sheik, whose identity varies depending on who you ask, lost control of the jinn, and it returned to its demonic ways, wandering the countryside and raping villagers. The most likely explanation for visits from the Popobawa is a phenomenon known as sleep paralysis or waking dreams. It is a hallucinatory state that can be entered when falling asleep or waking up. The brain has already disabled the body's ability to move in preparation for sleep, a defense mechanism to keep you from hurting yourself while you dream, but the brain is still partly awake. It's usually accompanied by a sensation of weight on your chest, hence the stories of it sitting on people's chest. The dreams that accompany hypnopompic or hypnagogic hallucination, depending on whether you are falling asleep or waking up, are usually extremely vivid and bizarre or terrifying. Witches, demons, and succubi have all been reported to sit on your chest, along with a whole host of other monsters. There's no real defense against the Popobawa, so if you are visited by it in the night, my only advice is to promise to tell everyone about it and pray you don't get fucked. That's it for this episode of Myths Your Teacher Hated. Keep up with new episodes on our Facebook page, on iTunes, on Stitcher, or on TuneIn. Or, you can follow us on Twitter as @HardcoreMyth. You can also find news and episodes on our website at mythsyourteacherhated.com. If you like what you've heard, I'd appreciate a review on iTunes, since it helps increase the show's standing and lets more people know that it exists. If you have any questions, any gods or monsters you'd want to learn about, or any ideas for future stories that you'd like to hear, feel free to drop me a line. I'm trying to pull as much material from as many different cultures as possible, but there are all sorts of stories I've never heard, so suggestions are appreciated. The theme music is by Tiny Cheese Puff, whom you can find on Fiverr.com. Next time, in honor of Halloween, I'll be telling the legend of the lost colony of Roanoke. It is a real-life ghost story, complete with suspicious disappearances, mysterious clues, and no definitive explanation. This story walks the fine line between history and myth, as all good legends do. It's a fun, creepy story, perfect for All Hallows Eve. That's all for now. Thanks for listening.